welcome to Vet with Michelle Malkin. On the front burner today, the Scott Thomas Beauchamp stalemate. The editors of the New Republic are probably hoping that the Scott Thomas Beauchamp saga disappears down the rabbit hole, but the blogosphere won't let it. We caught up with the online editor of the Weekly Standard, Michael Goldfarb, and also tried to get in touch with TNR editor Franklin Ford. Take a look. Bring us up to date on the Beauchamp saga.
Well, it's pretty much radio silence from the New Republic for the last few weeks. We had all types of promises of that they would get to the bottom of this. In the interim, they've had a few pieces where they've made reference to the Beauchamp scandal and that they have said that there are serious questions still out there. But we know for a fact that they have not talked to Scott Beauchamp since July 27th, the day after he sent in this missive to the plank and expressed outrage at people who would question his character, which is almost laughable given how he gave us so much evidence of bad character. But also in that letter, he said that that everything was true. And of course, the next day was the last day they ever talked to him. So somehow in that 24-hour period, they discovered that this incident at the Chow Hall with the disfigured woman did not happen in Iraq. They confronted him with this. Right. And we also know that on the 26th was the day that Beauchamp recanted in a sworn statement to the United States Army, 2 sworn statements, in fact, saying that all these things were a mix of exaggeration and outright fabrication.
Bring us back to the day when you first got the tips or the leads on this. You were the pioneer here in bringing this to the blogosphere and harnessing the open source intelligence and power of the blogosphere to ask these questions and probe. What prompted the story?
Well, there were a couple people here at the office, myself included, who sort of looked at this and were just sort of flabbergasted at, you know, of course you know that American soldiers are capable of cruelty, that they are capable of misconduct just like any normal citizen is. They're a very good reflection of the population at large. But there was this sort of pettiness to it, a sort of neatness to the narrative.
Of the shock troops.
Of the shock troops piece that was different than, you know, this wasn't we went in and we murdered some woman. You know, if they'd written that and said that, you'd say, okay, well, this is something really horrible that needs to be investigated. But this was just so contrived that it just didn't fit. It didn't seem right, and it seemed so convenient to fit the sort of left liberals' storyline, not only of soldier as victim, but soldier as perpetrator. And whether that was their motivation in running the piece, you know, who knows? We've gotten so little reliable information out of the New Republic as to how this all happened. But it certainly didn't sit well with people at this office, myself included, and we decided that we would put this out there. We've seen over and over again that the blogs are the most effective fact-checking tool that we have. So put this out to the mill bloggers, and these guys are serious people. They have real-world experience, and the information just started flowing in, and it just accrued in a way that there was not a single shred of corroborating evidence that came in.
He's really especially busy lately.
So he's too busy to see me right now.
Oh yes, ma'am, he told me that.
There was a Newsweek article, the most recent one in the September 3rd issue, that caught my eye, and it included Beauchamp in this other litany or gallery of soldiers who were being silenced because of their dissent. They said that one anecdote took place in Kuwait, not in Iraq. That's the way they characterized the fundamental lie of his entire work. That's got to be frustrating.
It's frustrating. You know, that piece in particular was a little frustrating. They got a lot more facts. They got their own facts wrong. They had this thing at the end of the piece about how the investigation is going, and they totally misunderstood what the actual situation is. It's sort of some sloppy reporting there. But the larger sense, yeah, it's frustrating. It seems like the mainstream media largely wants to ignore this or just wants it to go away. But at the same time, you know, they were confronted by a case of such egregious misconduct that at the end of the day, the New York Times, the AP, they did report that this wasn't true, that these stories were not true. The Army said they weren't true. There turned out to be a, you know, of course, the New Republic always puts it in parentheticals, you know, one key detail was wrong. But, you know, even the mainstream media was forced to face the fact that these were untruths.
Right. So, but you still have a case where the New Republic is claiming to these other fellow MSM outlets that, well, they're trying to get to Scott Beauchamp, but the Army is stonewalling them. So here you have a case, it's not just, he said, she said. They're claiming that the Army is lying to this day, at this moment, that about whether or not Beauchamp could be reached.
Well, from the very get-go, when we reported that he had recanted, my source was close to the investigation, who had seen the documents where Beauchamp had signed his name saying that these were not true stories. He told me that Beauchamp, as soon as that investigation wrapped up, as soon as those statements were signed, this all happened in very short order. He admitted to it the day that the investigation was launched by the Army. As soon as that wrapped up, Beauchamp was given, they took his cell phone away, they took his laptop away, but he had access to a telephone at the Morale Center just as every other soldier does. My source told me this in confidence. Later, Colonel Boylan wrote in and said, this is completely ludicrous. We are not stonewalling. The guy has access to a telephone. But the Army will not produce this guy for the New Republic. The New Republic seems to think that the Army has some obligation to produce him. They forget that this guy works for the United States Army, not the New Republic.
Oh, hello. Ms. Wall was asking if she could schedule an appointment now for sometime next week or all right. She should email you. All right, thank you. He says he's really busy right now, and if you could email him, could you do that?
Okay, what is his email address?
Yes, his email is F4, F-O-E-R, at TNR.com.
If you could sit down Scott Beauchamp in a face-to-face interview, what are the top 3 questions that you would ask him?
Well, I mean, I don't believe that this woman exists, so I'd have to ask him, does this woman exist? If he still sticks to the fact that he does exist, I'd ask him, what does that tell you about yourself, that you were mocking this woman before you even came into Iraq? What am I supposed to feel guilty that I supported a war and it turned you into a monster before you ever got there?
And this has been a huge stain on the New Republic, even though they're not acknowledging just how much of a journalistic embarrassment it was. Comes in the wake, of course, of the Stephen Glass fiasco. Where do you see the career of Franklin Foer headed?
I'm very frustrated with Frank Foer. At the beginning of this, all due respect, he's an editor. I'm an online editor. I sort of, assumed that he was acting in good faith. Since then, he's demanded an apology from me, demanded an apology from the other bloggers who were writing on this. He accused us of being reckless. I don't see how getting to the truth is reckless at all. And actually, the most damning indictment of the New Republic is that their own investigation seems to have been really just a cover-up. When Bob Owens went out and found the anonymous expert. So this expert, it turns out, when you got him on the record, he said none of what they said in that investigation. They totally mischaracterized my statements. The Bradley cannot do what they're saying it can do, which is what we had reported all along. And so, should he be responsible for running the Beauchamp pieces? I mean, ultimately the buck stops with the editor. But also now the cover-up has also been directed by, one has to assume it's been directed by Foer. And I'm really troubled. I know for a fact, I've spoken to people that they've called to source things and to sort of try and get further information in the course of their investigation. And whenever anything has come up that conflicts with their account, they've just not reported it.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I'll try that.
F4 at TNR.com.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Right,
Appreciate
you're
it.
welcome.